Let's go live. I've done it. I've succeeded at going live. I should end it here, actually. Wouldn't that be a lark? I'm gonna live pour this tea right into this cup. So let's set some groundwork so that people know this is part of the show that people they like to. If you're hearing this audio, you'll have to sort of do a bit of work. This is a live cup. This is not a cup I've CGI'd in after the fact. I do this live. I'm holding it, hit it against my head. It works. I've got this live teapot, and now I'm going to live pour tea into it. I'm over the keyboard. I DGAF. Look at that. You can't see the keyboard, but it's live as well. Got a nice hot cup of creamy Earl Grey, arguably the creamiest of the Earls. I don't know if you know an Earl that's creamier than Grey. You let me know. I'd love to hear it. Let's have feel free to write in. The lines are open if you want to add to that topic. Who is the creamier of the Earls of yore? The phone lines are open. You can call in. You can write in. I don't know. Does anyone find these jokes funny? I do. I like the silliness. I'm just gonna make sure that this is actually live. Oh yeah, there I am. I can see myself, and I'm muted too. That's perfect. That's exactly the way I want myself. One viewer. Thank you, one viewer. I so appreciate you. Put this there so I can see the comments. Move this so that I can get up top. There we go. And then cover the other window of myself because that's creepy. I don't know what you guys think. That's weird. My hair today is crazy. I'm growing it long, mid-length, sort of like back down here so I can push it back. But it's at the stage right now. That's the gesture. It looks like a McDonald's arch. This is the haircut that everyone had when I was in junior high school. Before we knew about things like product and all that we really understood was dippity-doo. So you could make your head into a cutting board, rock hard, or the alternative was you could have this haircut. And so that's what I'm rocking right now. And I went throughout all of Portland, Oregon. I went to many Targets looking for one of those toothed, I don't know what they're called. They're like a hair product. It's like toothed, sort of jagged, and then you can put it and then have your hair held back, sort of like I imagine athletes might wear them, and I think women probably more commonly get them, but I couldn't find one anywhere. I looked all over. I think I went to like 5 different Targets, Targets. Oh well. So this is what we're dealing with. Happy Canada Day to everyone. I hope you're excited for this celebration of Canada and also doing so with an appreciation for those that owned this land prior to colonialism and all of the damage it wrought upon them. So it's a day to celebrate and it's a day to reflect, and it's no right way to do any of that, but that's kind of what we're dealing with up here in Canada. What else does it feel like it's important for me to talk about before we dive into our topic on leadership and responsibility? Here's a cool antique I brought back from England, from Scotland when I was there. This just sits on my desk now, and anytime I want to see something up close, bam, I've got a microphone on a little stand. That's pretty cool. I can look at my hand up close. I can look at whoop, it moved on me. There we go. I could look at the number of viewers, see if it makes the number any bigger. It doesn't. It's failing at that job. And then the other thing I'll share, look at this right here. This is a hardcover proof of Who Do You Think You Are? Damn, look at that book. The spine we've worked out. We've got a nice looking back. Look at this guy. Hey, dude, how you doing? I know that guy. I'm not sure if this is a function of the proof or not, but it's like I noticed that some of these pages, the paper that they've used to print this seems thin and kind of cheap. And you can kind of see through to the images. Oh, you can only barely see it. You can kind of see this square here through that paper on the back. Maybe not. It doesn't look too bad. When I look at it up close, it looks a bit different. The colors are a little bit muted, and the binding, they haven't put the threading in there. Normally there's like threading that binds it to the spine. So I'm not sure if that's a function of the proof or if I have to do something to change that around. But anyhow, that's here. That's pretty cool too. I'm very excited. This doesn't even have a band on it saying not for resale. So in theory, I could just resell this. So the last thing I need to do now is proof the Kindle version of this, and then we're launching. So it's really at the point where I need to choose a launch date. I need to get 100 people lined up that are willing yes, we will purchase this book come launch date, and then we're off to the races. Um, so if you're watching this after the fact and you want to be one of those people, please let me know. I need 100 because that allows you to game Amazon's bestseller system. That's really all there is to do to get your book to bestseller. There's a couple things you can do. You can have a massive following. I do not have that. You have a massive platform and have people, you know, you send out an email to your list and 60,000 people are like, I can't wait for your book. That's a good way to do it. Or you can go low tech, which is what people like me do, who are self-publishing and doing their best, is that we get enough people that are willing to buy, an ebook version of Who Do You Think You Are for 99 cents on the release day. Good morning, Tommy. I will do so. Thank you. And that when you launch, all those people go on that day and buy the book, and then Amazon's algorithm is like, oh my God, this book is blowing up 100 people in one day, and it goes bestseller status. And then that I'm pretty certain is largely meaningless. Um, so and then, but you do it. It bumps it up. It gets to be seen in search results. Um, Regarding the launch of this book, like it's a really interesting thing because writing this, creating it, bringing the vision to life. I'm really happy with how it turned out. The marketing of it is I'm resistant to it. I don't like the feel of reaching out to people and be like, "Will you help me sell this thing I made?" I've got, I guess the best way I can describe it is I've got stuff. I've got stories about that. I've got energy around that, and I don't like doing that. So it's hard for me. I'm resistant, and it's easy for me in my resistance to hang out in this place like, what a bunch of bullshit. I don't need that. Which, is kind of true. I don't need it. Hey, Rachel, good morning. You and I have lots to talk about. I don't need to sell a bunch of copies. I'd be very happy just, gifting this to clients, to people that I run into that are like, hey, I'm looking for a book about this thing called ontology, but I can't find anything. Is there anything? I'd be like, hell yeah, I wrote it. I wrote the book on it because I couldn't find one that I liked. And so there's like a breakthrough there for me that I'm up against, and I notice I'm really resistant to it. And when I talk to my publisher and he tells me what I need to do, I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to do that. That sounds so tedious and crappy. And so it's an interesting kind of place that I find myself. The book's done. I actually like this book. The first book I published, by the time we got to the end of the publishing process, I was like, fuck this book. This one, I'm like, this book's awesome. I'll tell you in a sec, Rachel. I'll recruit you to be one of those people. I got to create a launch date and then we can do all this stuff. But don't you worry, you're going to find out. So that's happening. Mm, there's a number of places in life for me right now where I notice I'm kind of in resistance. So I'm in resistance with regards to making that marketing happen. There's new sort of projects I've had in my mind, like I rearranged my practice before I took the month off, before I took June off. So I created a bunch of space to start to take people down to plant medicine ceremony and do stuff like that. And I noticed now what's happening is the energy in me is like, I don't want to do that. It's a lot of work. And I find myself not spending my days with much direction. There's not a lot of like, let's make this thing happen. So I've just got a lot of, you can almost describe it like lethargy, but I think a more appropriate way to describe it is resistance. It happens as I get up, I'm like, oh, I could do that stuff. And I'm like, oh, or I could spend the entire day playing video games, which I've been noticing that's been really present for me lately. So nothing I need to make myself wrong for, nothing to vilify, more just something for me to distinguish and notice, oh, that is sort of there. And, I'm getting to the point where I feel really ready to start to take that on, to start to actually address that. And one of the reasons I word it that way is because sometimes well, for all of us, I think what happens is we notice ourselves not doing something, and then we're like, I should be doing something. And that creates a bit of a tension internally, where on the one hand, we don't really want to do anything. We're like, I don't want to be made to do something. And then on the other hand, we're like, but you should do something. So what you're currently doing is wrong. And then you get these two counteracting forces inside. You just end up in tension. And so when I find myself in that place, kind of like I described, right? Playing video games, maybe I should do this thing. These days, especially when I'm on vacation still, I find that the most powerful place I can be is to really empower where I'm at, to be like, okay, I'm gonna let myself not do the thing that I don't want to do for a bit. I'm gonna let myself be in resistance. I'm gonna allow that resistance to exist within me. I'm gonna empower it, and I'm gonna set a time limit on it. I'm gonna time box it. So for me, it's been like, all right, through to the end of June, and then we're gonna get into some action come July. Like being on the live show, like we're doing today. Hell yes. Okay, so let's talk about these topics. They're good topics. I got these topics from Katie. I don't know how I say last name, Katie. Katie Onyekere. Onyekere, I think. Onyekere. If you don't follow Katie, I recommend you do. She's amazing. She's a really powerful woman. Works primarily in like metaphysical. You know, a lot of her work, I think, is astrological, horoscopal, energetic. But whatever form her work's taking, her being is very powerful, and I like a lot of the content she posts. And she does a really great job owning. She's a very sovereign woman, so definitely recommend following her if you don't already. Um, she wrote one thing which I'm going to read in a sec, one topic suggestion, and then Monica wrote another one. Monica, I don't know how I say your last name, Monica Vegalem. It sounds Indian. Anyhow, Monica. I think it's pronounced Monica. It's spelled Mounica. So that could be Maunica or Munica. I don't know. It doesn't matter. I'm going to just share you what they wrote. So Katie wrote, I was thinking I'm at a new level, and I think I found my happy medium between acceptance, accountability, and responsibility with my clients. Clients, people in our lives, direct reports. We're going to look at this through this all of these different places through the lens of responsibility. And Katie continues, it's taken years of play, and of course it shifts depending on the container to feel like I've got it. But I also realized I want to study this, the space between yours and mine in that mentor-mentee, client, coach, leader, direct, that relationship. The space between taking every responsibility I can to make sure I'm offering the guidance to closing the gaps and finding the step for my clients while leaving them responsible for their results. How do you define success and integrity in what you offer, even though you can't be responsible for their results? And then Monica, so that's a great question, right? Really, Katie's asking kind of the question of like, where does my responsibility in a relationship where I'm supporting someone start and end? Where do I stop being responsible? And it's like, oh, this isn't mine to own. This is theirs to own. And so I really like that question. And what we're going to do is we're going to broaden that out to look in a whole bunch of areas, like in romantic relationship, you know, with your wife, your husband, your partner, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your whatever. How does responsibility in a relationship work like that? And we'll look at responsibility as a leader and how does that work? And what's the other one that I've got here? Oh yeah, being responsible for unwillingness to be responsible and victimization and victimhood. How does that play out in this sort of stuff? So we'll cover all of that. And then Monica wrote, Adam, I'd love to hear some examples of breakdowns and breakthroughs you've coached your clients through and practices that supported this process. So definitely got a few of those, and I'll share some of those. So let's talk about responsibility. And I'm going to lay a bunch of groundwork for us here. So we'll start by laying like, what is this notion of responsibility? How does this work? And I think that'll be where we talk about victimization, victimhood as well. It's really important. And on the last live show, I actually want to bring it up here. We'll look up Adam Quiney because I got a really great comment from, I think her name is Jessica, asking about responsibility. Yes, here we go. She wrote, Jessica, she said, she prefaced it Trigger warning, challenging identity related question. As a white male, can you imagine how restricting focus to one's personal responsibility in their victimization might generate shame? Absolutely. And so I said I'll come back and speak to this more fully um, when I'm back at my desk. Now we're live. This is a good time to speak about that. So responsibility is fundamentally it's never about blame. As soon as we get into like blaming or holding responsibility like it's a indication of fault, that actually gets in the way of being responsible. Fault or blame suggests like there is something wrong with where we've ended up and it's because of you, and therefore there's something wrong with you, or there's something wrong with what you did. And that energy of like something's either wrong with you or what you did, which then trickles down ultimately into like, and I'm wrong because I did something wrong. That doesn't, it makes it very hard for someone to open up. And the pursuit of leadership, I believe, is ultimately about people becoming more and more open and more expressed as they create the results they're committed to creating. That it's both of those. So to be an effective leader, we got to be able to create the results we say we're committed to creating. If I say, I'm going to bring clean water to all of this country, and then I get more and more open, but I never bring a drop of clean water into the country, well, that's not very effective leadership, is it? Yeah, I feel great and I'm open. And that's good. We're not vilifying that. It's just that's not really very effective leadership. So the sort of leadership we're aiming towards that we're talking about here is it's the duality of those two things. Am I able to create effective results? And as I do so, am I able to become more embodied as myself? Am I able to become more expressed as myself? Am I able to become more and more open? As soon as we get to blame, making someone wrong energetically, that energy, what that does is it causes someone to close and get defensive. And as we close and get defensive, we get very linear, we get very rigid, we get very stuck and entrenched in our old patterns because our old patterns were what we learned to use to deal with that stuff in the past. And it makes it very hard for us to create what's next, to create what's new, to create something in the unknown. When you are actively feeling like you've done something wrong, you're not really very inclined to go out into the scary unknown. You're not inclined to do anything that's scary. What you're inclined to do is reach for comfort. Hunker down, put up the walls. Fuck you. You're wrong. I'm going to leave, run away, all of that sort of stuff. Responsibility, so then, is not about blame. It's really about how can I take ownership for where I find myself? And if I'm leading a group, how can I take ownership for where we find this group? That's what it's about. Ownership. Ownership meaning, how have I created this? Whatever I'm experiencing this moment, how can I see I have led to it being created this way, this experience that's happening? And the reason that a leader looks through that lens is because that gives them access to power. If, no matter what's happening, if I can see how I've contributed to it, now I have access to do something about it. Now I'm like, oh, I'm creating this experience because that person cut me off in traffic, and I'm making that meaningful. I'm making it mean that person is a jerk, and I'm making it mean that I'm in a world surrounded by jerks, and I'm making it mean that that means I can never get ahead, and no wonder I'm upset. Fuck you, world. Oh, well, I'm the one creating that. Now I've got some power. Now I've got power in the sense like I can do something about it. And that brings us back to an empowered state of living, an empowered state of leading. I get to be the one that creates my world. That's what leadership allows for. It allows us to actually make the life we want to have happen. Responsibility is the fuel of that. So the more I can take responsibility for what's happening in my life, the more access I have to my own power. And again, remember, power being the ability to create the life that I want to create, the ability to create the results that I'm committed to creating. So learning to become more and more responsible for what's going on in our lives and the lives of those around us, and we'll come back to that in a sec, but learning to take more and more responsibility, free from blame, free from being wrong for something, but just for being responsible, gives me access to my power. So then the next place we want to look there is, yeah, but Adam, what about those situations where someone really feels certain they have no access to power, like they really feel like something was done to them? That's okay. We can't force someone to be responsible. There's no point where, as soon as we start to try to impose responsibility on someone, like you should take responsibility for how this has gone for you. You know, if you've got someone who's feeling like a victim, they're feeling like, my partner did this to me and I had nothing to do with it, and it's all my partner, or my staff show up late and it's nothing to do with me. It's totally fine. And we can't force someone to take responsibility for that. In fact, the irony is, as soon as you impose responsibility on someone, as soon as you are sort of energetically holding it like you over there should and must take responsibility for this, that defeats the notion of responsibility, because responsibility comes from within. It's where I say, I'm going to take a look and see how I created this. Having someone put that on top of me, it's actually their energy that I'm now running. I'm like, oh, I guess I should do this. And as soon as I should do something that's from without rather than from within, it all falls apart. Further, when we try to impose responsibility on someone, it further entrenches their victimhood. It actually makes them more of a victim because they're not choosing to take a look at how they've created what they've created. They're doing it because they're being told to. They're doing it because they're trying to escape the energy that you're dumping on them. So it has to be something we create internally. Can I get, if anyone is willing, just, hey, this is making sense, or hey, I'm lost, because I feel a little, perhaps a little bit clumsy in my explanation of this. I'm distinguishing this as I go, and I don't have this quite as well laid out as I'd like to. So let me know, like, is this making sense? Are you following along? Have I lost you at any point? That'd be really helpful. I'd really appreciate that. So we've talked about like what is responsibility, the fact that it's not blame, it's not something you've done wrong, and it can't be imposed, it can't be pushed onto you. And what that means is that being responsible is never ever something you should do. Anytime we hear, anytime we've got something like it's something I should do, that's an imposition. That's not you doing or taking on something because you want to or because you're choosing to. You're doing it because of this external idea that that's what you should do. So oftentimes people will be like, oh, I really want to practice being more responsible. How come? Well, I think it's a good idea. Yeah, but how come? Well, I just feel like a leader should take more responsibility. Yeah, but how come? Like, why would you choose that? That's really important. Until that, okay, great. Thank you, Cami. Thank you, Lydia. Appreciate both of you. And it's nice to see you. It's very important. By the way, Cami, happy moving. You're in Manitoba now? Is that right? I think I saw you had moved away from this beautiful island we live on, which made me very sad, to Manitoba. But I trust that you're very happy where you are, so that's cool too. So it can't be something we should do. The reason you might choose to practice more responsibility in your life and in your leadership is because it gives you access to more of your power. That's the only reason really to take it on. It also allows life to become something more chosen and created by you rather than something that is happening at you, like a cork in the ocean, you know, getting bobbed around, bumped, kicked over here, shot over there by the waves. That's a way to live our life. It's just not a particularly empowered way to live our life. It's sort of like, I'm just going to be a jellyfish. And wherever the ocean takes me, that's where I go, and that's what I'm willing to accept. Okay, so I think at this point now, we can start to answer the question. Now that I've laid all that groundwork. Am I in my live dashboard? I am. Okay, great. Hey, Dayphil, it's nice to see you. We're due for a catch-up. So the question then is, where is the line? Where do I stop being responsible for other people and, you know, honor myself? Where does my sovereignty start and stop? And you've probably gotten the sense already that, again, the leader practices being responsible for more and more and more of the life that they're experiencing. This starts to get really challenging because There's a point where, if you're, let me just see if I can get my words around this. This is the probably the crux of what we're going to be talking about here. Let's use relationships as an example. So often in romantic relationships, people get into a state where they're like, I'm 50% responsible for what happens in the relationship. There's 100% responsibility. I can't be responsible for that other person. That's not my work. I can only be responsible for myself. And therefore, that's where I'm going to put my attention. So it's like this classic 50%, 50% responsibility that happens in a relationship. And that's fine. It's not bad. It's not wrong. It's a totally fine place for people to be. The trouble there then is that we get into a lot of the conversations that you'll experience happen a lot on social media and a lot in people whose lives seem to have a lot of acrimony, a lot of drama in them, which is this idea like your opinion of me is none of my business. The impact I have on you is none of my business. That's your business. That's on you to take care of. Yeah, sort of. But if I'm a leader and I'm committed to having a particular impact, whether it's in my romantic relationship or with the 6,000 people that I lead, stopping at that point, being like, I'm only responsible for what I create, starts to become a bit of uh, like an off ramp, a bit of a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like a get out of jail free card. It's like, uh, I don't know what it is. It's, anyhow, it's a cop out. That's the word I'm looking for. I don't have to take a look over here. That's your responsibility. So in marriage, for example, I can say like, hey, it's not my job to make my wife happy. And on some level, that's absolutely true. Scapegoat, that's a good one too, Cami. Thank you. But at the same time, it is my job to take a look and see like, how might I be creating this experience in our marriage where my partner is always unhappy? Is there some way that I could take a look and see how I'm being about that? How am I showing up in relationship to my partner's unhappiness? Are there things that I can be responsible for that I do or don't do that lead to that experience with my partner? Or if I'm a leader committed to bringing, let's say, equality into the space. No, let's say empowerment. I'm really committed that people in their work with me feel empowered. And what I notice is that I do this work, I bring it to people, and people get like, let's say 75% of the people are like, that was amazing. And 25% of the people feel really like, I suck. I'm just not up to the task. I don't feel good. When you talk to me that way, Adam, I didn't feel like you respected me, et cetera, et cetera. The cop out, scapegoat, as Cami said, the easy way out is for me to say, well, I'm clear on what I'm doing. 75% is fine. That's great. And this is just, part of the nature of my work is 25% of the people are going to be unhappy and feel disempowered, even though I'm standing for them to be empowered. So that's kind of like, it's none of my business how you take this work. I deliver the work. You can show up for it or you can fuck off, right? That's kind of that energy. But that's letting myself off the hook. If what I'm really committed to is that people through their work with me feel empowered and lit up and inspired, stopping at 3 out of 4 of every group of people feel that way, and 1 out of every 4 feel the opposite, I'm not really, I'm stopping in my commitment. I'm giving up under the guise of it's none of my business. That's just the way it is. So this is where a lot of us, we get responsible that far, but then we let off the hook. We let off the gas. We don't go all the way further because it would require a new level of taking responsibility for the impact we're having. As a leader, I have to start asking questions like, who am I being with these 25% of the people that I'm working with? Is there something that I'm stepping over? Is there something that I'm not conscious of? Is there some energy that I'm saying yes to that might be creating that? Is there a way I tend to get listened to by people? Do people hear my voice and make a particular meaning about that? And if so, would it be valuable for me to be conscious of that and maybe acknowledge that fact at the start or be a little softer in my energy or. And so I don't have to do any of that. None of that is required. It's perfectly okay to stop anywhere along the path. What's available though is that if I'm willing to look down that road, if I'm willing to walk that road and look through that lens, I can start to live a life where I don't have to say that's just the way it is for 25% of the people, or that's just the way it is in my relationship every third day, or that's just the way it is in this group of people that I'm leading. Instead, I can always take a look on my side and I can always find ways to continue to improve. And the thing about life is there's always going to be ways. There's always going to be a place where you can be more masterful. We never fully arrive. I think that's cool. Some people think it sucks. They're like, you can turn that into a weapon to use against yourself, Adam. You're always striving. And that's true too. So we have to find a way to be comfortable where we are right now, right here. And if we're choosing to embark on a really big, audacious mission as a leader, the opportunity is to continue to taking more responsibility so we can keep stepping into this. We can keep growing. We can keep becoming more responsible for everything that's happening. And as you look down this lens, where you end up is I can be 100% responsible for what's happening in my relationship. I can be 100% responsible for the impact I have on other people. And simultaneous to that, they too can be 100% responsible. So responsibility, the amount of responsibility for what's happening that you take down this lens that I'm inviting you to look through is irrelevant to the amount of responsibility the other person's taking. The way most people sort of hold it in relationships is like the 50-50 dynamic is if my partner takes 25% of the responsibility, then I fill in the gap 75%. The 100%, 100%, that's an accomplishment coaching distinction. I, as a leader, can take 100% responsibility for what's happening. And so too can anyone else that's engaged with what's going on with me. That is a powerful place for people to show up into relationship from. It's a powerful place to lead people from. And it's a powerful place to invite people into their leadership. I'm just reading what you wrote here, Cami. Cami says, in the past year or two, I landed on something that really hit me. In all our relationships, we project beliefs onto others. Meaning, if I believe men are irresponsible, not compassionate, won't love me, cheat, etc., I actually only see them that way. Which then, of course, has them show up that way, even if it's not their nature. Being able and willing to take responsibility for this is life-changing. Well said, Cami. There's a bit of an irony here. This is not a popular, people don't like this, but like we most point out in other people the things we do. So to Cami's point, if I'm the sort of person that does stuff maliciously, like when someone says something and I feel slighted by it, I go and sabotage their car. I stick a potato, or I like scratch their car, or I do something like that. If I'm that person, then I'm also going to attribute that to everyone around me. I'm going to look out into the world and see the very things that I tend to do. Here's the part people really don't like about this. Those that most often throw the term gaslighting around tend to be the ones that do the most gaslighting. Now, we've got to be a little cautious there because there are times when people are manipulated. That does happen. But it's really worth taking a look. If you're someone that throws these terms around, or any term really, take a look and see how you can be responsible for being the one creating that. And a really great book on this, a fantastic book on this, is called The Queen's Code by, I believe it's Alison Armstrong. I'm just going to look that up right now. Get you a, there it is. I'm going to get you the Amazon link because that's how I do, guys. It's going to be a Canadian link. Suck it. It's Canada Day. This is how we go. Boom. The Queen's Code. This is a book primarily, it's a book for women that want to become masterful in romantic relationships, but I think everyone should read it. And one of the things in the Queen's Code that the author, it's written like a parable, which is a little cheesy. The writing's a little bit cheesy, but the book is phenomenal, as are the concepts. And one of the things the main character is confronted by is this idea where she's being trained in this new way of relating to men. And the person asks her, like, well, what's the ideal man? And she describes, like, oh, this, 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 this. And the person's like, yeah, so basically a woman, right? And she's like, yeah, I guess so. And so what's happening is that the main character is relating to men like they should be like women, as opposed to relating to men like they should be like men. And likewise, men do the same sort of thing, right? What's the ideal woman? Oh, she's she takes care of her feelings. So I'm not going to be. I'm trying to be charitable here or responsible for how I speak here. I'm doing this on the fly, but like she doesn't like dump her feelings anywhere. She sort of manages them. She's committed to like a project, blah blah blah. Oh, so you want like a man? You want a man without hair? You want a less hairy man with boobs? Is basically what you're wanting. Because we do have differences, and that's not always a popular thing. There's this notion like all differences between man and woman are socially constructed. I don't subscribe to that. So if you're here and you do, that's okay. But we're not going to be talking about that. And so there's this notion where when a woman or a man, when we look at our partner and we are sort of like already in the Queen's Code, the main character is setting herself and her man up because she's waiting for the man. Oh, look, he's insensitive because he doesn't show up the way I expect the perfect man should show up. And then she relates to everything he does through the lens of his insensitivity instead of relating to it like, oh, what if there's a different reason he was doing this? That sort of stuff. Lydia, I agree with you. Lydia's saying Queen's Code is amazing. I've read it multiple times. Yeah, it's a phenomenal book. I really wish, Bay and I both really wish that there was, that she'd written a book like that for men. Maybe not her jam, maybe not what Allison's about. I know she does, she offers, Bay wrote her and was like, hey, do you have any book like this for men? I want to read that one too. And she was like, no, but you could take our courses. And that's cool. I mean, I get it as an author. It's sort of like when you have a book like this that took forever to write, and then people are like, what about a book like this? Could you write that book? And it's like, no, I wrote that book. So I get why she doesn't have one, but I sure would like to read something called like the King's Code or something equivalent to that. David Data is not quite along the same lines. I think the Queen's Code's a much better book. What's going on here? There we go. I messed it up further. So the lens through which we are holding someone is just trying to get my hair not crazy, guys. There we go. The lens through which we relate to someone, the things that we look for are part of what we can be responsible for. Okay, anything else I want to talk about as far as response? Oh, yes. So couple other pieces. It's really easy when we're taking 100% responsibility, when that's our commitment to start to make it like almost a crusade and to step over some of the things that are really important that we be responsible for that we're unaware of. Like, how do I feel? You know, we can get, I can often fall into this where I'm really focused on like, who do I need to be in my relationship or who do I need to be in this friendship without checking like, how do I feel about all this? And then being responsible for the way I feel. Like, I might feel like, wow, I feel discarded and like I'm not really appreciated. Ah, well, maybe there's a conversation I need to bring. Or maybe I need to start setting a boundary or start being like, hey, it's not okay that this is happening, or hey, this is how I'm feeling. So responsibility is kind of this interesting fluid state that we can find ourselves in. Do you like that? That's the fluidity right there of responsibility. And so it's easy for us to get caught in this notion like, well, but Adam, if you're always taking responsibility for how the relationship's going, then you're stepping over your own emotional state or your own blah, blah, blah. Not at all. In fact, the more you are taking responsibility, the more you have to actually start to plug more deeply into your own state too. How do I feel? How is this going? Do I feel good about what's happening? Hey, Sherry, do I feel bad in this moment? Do I feel like I want to keep doing this? And then what is there for me to take on there? Um, the final part of this is part of what we have to be responsible for is our unwillingness to be responsible. That's it's often the first step we kind of have to step into when we're practicing leadership is responsibility can often feel like a burden. It's like when you get into a fight with your brother or whoever, and you know you're like, fuck you, and then your brother's like, fuck you. I don't know, that's how I imagine we fight. Fuck you, fuck you. And then you're holding on to like, well, he was a jerk and he did this, and he's holding on to, well, Adam was a jerk and he did that. My brother and I don't really fight much because we don't get to talk too often, but you get the idea. So in that space, responsibility can feel like a real burden because if I want to be responsible for creating an amazing relationship with my brother, for example, and I'm caught in that situation, it's sort of like, well, I can sort of sit with my arms crossed and wait for him to cross the line and apologize. That's an option. But if I really want to make this relationship work, I'm going to have to do that. I got to cross. That's kind of like the burden of responsibility. It's not really a burden. We get the choice of how we relate to it, but it can feel that way sometimes. Like, fuck, I got to be the one to do this again. Why do I have to be the one to do this again? I don't. I'm just choosing it. I'm taking it on. Oh, hey, Jess. Uh, Just writing, Adam, I just want to acknowledge you for challenging yourself to take more responsibility for how you're shaping your experience. I wonder, how does it feel for you to be celebrating Canada Day today? Thanks, Jess. That's been the work for about 12 years. That would be how long I've been challenging myself to take more responsibility for my experience. And thank you. And celebrating Canada Day, I talked about this at the start. It's like mixed. It's a mixed bag these days to celebrate Canada Day. It's a beautiful thing to celebrate a country that I think is doing well in a lot of ways, and then there's a lot of tragedy and stuff that we're sort of learning to be with and taking on. So it's all of that. And Lydia, thanks for sharing that resource, Making Sense of Men by Allison, a great companion to the Queen's Code. Aho. So that's the first part. Back to what I was saying, when we get into a fight with someone or we get squabbling or we're leading and someone's got an issue, it can be frustrating because we're like, well, I'm standing for their leadership. So doesn't that mean I should hold the space for them to come and be responsible for what's going on? Yeah, but often in leadership, we have to be the one to model something. And so if we are sitting there wanting someone to practice responsibility, they often require us to model it. And again, that goes back to, thus, the leader's job is to go first. And that can be really challenging. So we have to model responsibility. And once again, it can be easy to fall down the path of like, fuck, why do I have to be the one to do that? Why do I have to take that on? That sucks. So the flip side to this is sometimes we're unwilling. Sometimes, oftentimes, our truth is, fuck being responsible. I don't want to. I feel like I'm right. I don't feel like I should have to take responsibility, and I don't want to. And from that place, it's really easy to get caught up in that tension we mentioned at the start, where we're like, I should take responsibility, but I don't want to. But I should, but I don't want to. And the way out of that tangle is to be responsible for the fact that we're unwilling to be responsible. So it kind of gets meta. And the way that looks is like, oh, I'm actually currently unwilling. I'm not willing to model this. I'm not willing to go first. I need time. I need some space. I need to allow myself to sit in my unwillingness. And until we can do that, there's not much else for us to do. That's kind of the step. That's the first step. Am I willing to be unwilling? Am I willing to allow myself to sit in my unwillingness for as long as I need to sit here? As I do so, eventually something can shift. Fastest way to create any kind of internal change for ourselves and anyone else is to let go of the need for us to change, to allow ourselves to be right where we are. If we can take that on, then things can start to, it's almost like a thawing happens. We start to soften. So the first step towards responsibility, or often one of the harder steps for, certainly for me and for a lot of people I know, is a willingness on our part to be unwilling, to acknowledge when we're unwilling, to be responsible for the fact that we're like, fuck that, I'm not taking that on. And that's where our freedom can come. Let's see if I have anything else to talk about on. Oh yeah, the bigger sort of, one of my teachers described this as opening, as he was talking about opening as our anger in men's work. Often men have a lot of anger because we've not been taught how to be responsible about our anger. And so, societally, we kind of, we repress anger. we repress a lot of stuff, just to be clear. One of those things is anger. And so what happens as a result is most people, men especially, because a man's anger tends to be a little more violent physically, not necessarily, but what we do with our anger is we quash it and we stuff it down. And so what happens is when we get angry, we make that wrong and then we close around our anger. And then you've got like this little block of coal being turned into a diamond from all the internal pressure. And so the practice in men's work often is to have men practice opening as their anger. That doesn't mean turn to someone and belch hot fire into their face. It means, can I give myself permission to be angry? And then can I practice opening as that energy? Opening means, can I let the space between my eyebrows soften? Can I relax my jaw? Can I let my breath come deeper into my body while allowing anger to circulate through my body, while letting that energy move through my body? Because it's all any emotion is energy. If you're someone who's been trained out of sadness, can you open as your sadness? When you're sad, can you let the sadness exist in your body and open? It's very similar to when you're getting tattoo work done. I practice this when I'm sitting on the table with my tattoo artist doing horrible things to me. I feel pain and I want to clench and tighten. And so my practice, to the extent I'm willing to practice it, becomes, can I open as this pain? Can I take a deeper breath rather than a more shallow breath as I'm feeling pain in my body? Can I relax my hands to the best of my ability as I'm feeling pain? It's the exact same practice. There I'm doing it with something physical. Here you're practicing it with something energetic. Can I open as my anger? And so being responsible about our unwillingness to be responsible is that same kind of energy. Can I open as whatever it is that is having me close? Open as my anger, open as my softness, open as my frustration. Can I open as my closure? It's kind of a funny mindfuck, right? What would it look like for me to practice opening as my closure? I don't know. You figure that one out. That's for you guys to answer for me. Dave McDonald. Hey, Dave. Dave says, I have a coach I've worked with that says, relax your asshole. It sounds silly, but it's a vagal nerve consideration. Yeah, silly. And I mean, just because asshole's kind of funny, right, as a practice, but it's, there's a lot of profundity to that practice too, because our sphincter is something we learn to tuck our tailbone to like pull in. We tighten a lot there. And so I think that's a brilliant practice, Dave, is to like, can I allow myself to be angry while relaxing my sphincter? Let that part of me expand. Some of the places I really like when it comes to like opening, the practice of opening or relaxing, letting myself soften are, can I soften my gaze? I like that one a lot. Can I relax the space between my eyebrows? You'll notice I have quite a furrow there because when I was, well, for most of the first 20 years of my life, safety for me was my skepticism. And so this was the look on my face often. Skeptical, critical. And so when I get frightened, this space between my eyebrows tends to, that's the energy, right? I'll get skeptical of it. Oh, really? And so can I soften between my eyebrows? Can I relax that space? Can I relax my thoughts? Can I soften my thoughts? Can I relax my sphincter? Can I relax and deepen my breath? Can I relax my stomach? Those are the places I really like. So softening our gaze, relaxing the space between our eyebrows, relaxing our sphincter, relaxing our thoughts, relaxing our breathing, and relaxing our stomach. What that does as you practice that is it allows you to practice being with something. The ultimate state of being would be, let's say you wanted to be with X, whatever it was. I want to learn to better be with anger, or I want to better be with sadness, or I want to better be with people giving me advice when I haven't fucking asked for it. Not that I'm using examples from my own life. The state of being is almost like if you've ever done a float, one of those float tanks where it's a sensory deprivation tank. You're in salt water that's very buoyant. There's no sounds. You're just there with your thoughts and you're sitting there just sort of like floating. That's the state of being, relaxed, open, and allowing whatever there is to sort of flow through you. And Jess, do you prefer Jess or Jessica? I'll call you Jessica if that's your preference. Jessica's saying it's the trick to giving birth without pain is surrendering. I agree, and I would even go further. It's the trick. The trick. It's like it's the trick to letting go of all suffering is to open as whatever is coming to us. Our suffering is ultimately a function of our resistance to what is happening. That doesn't make pain less painful, by the way. Pain's painful. That's the nature of pain. And sadness is saddening. And anger is angering. Angering? Yeah. Those things are still there. But what it does is it lets us be in harmony with that energetic state that's happening in the moment. So rather than trying to resist the pain that I'm experiencing, I allow myself to experience that pain. Rather than trying to avoid my anger, I allow myself to be angry. And then there's a bunch more work for me to do, right? Oh, now that I can let myself be angry, I got to start being responsible for its impact in the world. I don't have to do anything, but that's what the leader does. Oh, when I start to allow anger to course through my body, people get nervous. Some people, like my children, start to be a little like unsure of themselves. And so I got to take responsibility for that if that's what I choose to. And so that might look like, oh, I've got some anger going through me right now. It's not about you. I'm just going to go work this out. I'm going to go punch a pillow. Don't worry, it's a bit silly. I'm fine. So we can start to work through that stuff and be responsible for the impact of all of this rather than stuffing it down below the level of our consciousness and then trying like thinking that that's responsibility. And what that's like for people is, it's like when you're standing around someone who's smiling and making a lot of intense eye contact and your thoughts are kind of like, I'm pretty sure this person's going to cut my head off with an axe. I feel like they're going to murder me coldly pretty soon. And yet I don't know where I stand with this person. That's what happens when we try to suppress stuff like anger, sadness, all of that. It creates this weird energy for people. They're like, I don't know how to be with this because on some level we can feel that anger simmering below the surface. Thank you, Jess. Thank you for your brilliance and your generosity. I appreciate you. Lydia's saying it's interesting that we bring up suffering. I noticed this week places where I'm staying and suffering. I'm noticing it. Yeah, me too. This month off has been a lot of travel. It's been 3.5 weeks of traveling and about maybe 12 days at home. So that's a lot of not being at home. And it's a lot of no structure. And I noticed the things I've been like my drinking has been I've been drinking more. So that's one thing I'm kind of like, oh, that's going on. I've been more avoidant of intimacy with my wife. I've been more my eating feels less healthy. And there's been like a degree of wanting to keep some things at arm's length. Like I don't want to look at my bank account. I don't want to do budgeting. I don't want to see where our money is going. I don't want to look at my email. And it creates a degree of suffering. And the funny thing again is one, I know I'm reliable to return to the structure that supports me to take that stuff on. So I'm really clear that that's not a permanent condition, so to speak, right? Come July, come today, well, really Monday, I'm going to be back. I'm going to be reasserting structures, working out, doing all the stuff I know keeps me healthy, meditating, et cetera, et cetera. And I also know I'm unwilling to let go of that suffering I'm causing myself. I could actually create more suffering on top of the underneath. And so then the practice becomes, okay, can I open as my unwillingness to do anything different, even though I know that having a third drink makes me feel worse about myself, about how I sleep, blah, blah, blah. Even though I know avoiding intimacy is not what I'm really committed to, even though I know that avoiding looking at our bank account means we spend more money and then I feel stressed out about, even though all of that is true, I'm not really willing to do something else. So can I empower that's what I'm currently doing, and can I empower the impact of what that's currently doing? Okay, I'm going to feel a little bit worse about myself during this period of time. Okay, and then can I start to work with that? Funny time. Taking time off is a funny beast for me. At least this much. A month is always an interesting impact. Okay, let's talk about Monica's question. I really like this. Monica asks, Adam, I'd love to hear some examples of breakdowns and breakthroughs you've coached your clients through and the practices that supported this process. So we're going to talk here about well, what is ultimately happening in coaching, and then I'll share a story. I won't share too many, so because that starts to be a little voyeuristic, and I want to honor confidentiality and stuff like that. So the nature of a breakthrough is there's something we really, really get clear that we want, and there's something in the way that we're afraid of. That's called the breakdown. And what we as humans do is we put all of our attention in life in avoiding the breakdown. That becomes the game of our life. And we keep looking there to the extent that we lose sight, or we lose sight of the thing we want on the other side of the breakdown, the breakthrough, and our life becomes, how do I make sure this breakdown doesn't happen? So as an example, I might, as a breakthrough, want a lot more interaction, a lot more connection in my life. I want more relationships. I want more friendships. I want more friendships that are deep, and I want more friendships that are shallow, and I want more acquaintances. I want more connection. That's the breakthrough I want. But I'm afraid of that because if I go after that, I'm worried people will reject me. If I go and start talking to people, I'm worried that they'll turn away. I'm worried that they'll think I'm a loser. That's the breakdown I'm afraid of. Now, you could say, just don't think that, Adam. Just don't worry about that. But that's not holding our fears with much reverence. Our fears are there for a reason. And the reason those fears are so prevalent for me, and whatever your fears are, the reason they're so prevalent for you, is because being rejected was very painful when I was a child. And it was like really, really excruciating. So that breakdown I'm avoiding isn't just a silly story I need to get over. It's like a real concrete thing that I've got evidence for and I've got a history of and blah, blah, blah. So what happens is we're like, I really want that thing, but I'm really afraid of this thing. The breakdown. I'm afraid of being rejected. I'm afraid of trying to put myself out there and people being like, well, actually, you're a fucking loser. I don't want anything to do with you. Thanks for the invite to your party. I'm not going to come. No, thank you, sir. And so my life starts to become about strategies to, at first, it becomes about how do I get that thing that I really want, but not have that rejection. And so I start to create patterns, strategies, habits, life hacks, tools, all to avoid the rejection I'm afraid of. So I might read books like How to Win Friends and Influence People and really become didactic about it and really become very like dogmatic in my application of that. Always ask people their name, always use it 3 times in conversation, all of that stuff. I might become very good at like being glib and chatty and charming and like talk really fast and fill all the space with more conversation so that there's never a chance for people to sort of reject me. And I might do things like when I notice people look at their watch, I might read that as, oh, they don't want to talk to me anymore. So I abruptly end the conversation using my own skills. Don't worry, I've got to go do something. See you later. And they're like, that was fucking weird. Why did that guy I thought we were, okay, whatever. So I develop all of these patterns, and what these do is they are patterns to resist the breakdown I'm afraid of. They're all strategies to help me not have to be confronted by that which I'm afraid of. And as I do that more and more and more, basically what's happening is I'm ensuring that I never have to confront a particular thing. I never have to face that rejection I'm afraid of in my life. And as that happens, it's kind of like when you raise a child in a bubble and you don't let them go play in dirt and you don't let them go outside with other children. Their immune system becomes very weak because it's never trained. They never develop a tolerance for a certain degree of dirt and grime and bacteria and stuff. And so just like that child raised in a bubble, we become very sheltered around this particular breakdown. So it's not that I become more and more resistant or resilient or whatever to the breakdown I'm afraid of. I become less. I become more and more fragile because I've kept it further and further at bay, and because I've given myself less and less chance to practice being with it. And over time, what happens as a result of that is it becomes more significant. We become more afraid of it. We become more fragile, and we become more and more focused on how do I avoid this breakdown, until eventually we arrive at a point in our life where our life becomes about avoiding the breakdown rather than achieving the breakthrough on the other side of it. And eventually we forget about the breakthrough entirely. And we just start saying things like, I'm just the sort of person that has a lot of acquaintances but not many friends. right? I'm not aware of it at this point now that I'm saying that, but I've given up on that breakthrough. And I've just become accustomed and started to identify myself as the impact of my strategies to avoid the breakdown. So that's been going on for a while when people come and meet me, or when I started getting into this work, or when I bring the next breakdown to my coach and we start doing work with it. Rachel and I start to take something on. I'm like, I want to create a new breakthrough here. I'm confronting this sort of stuff. So for me, when I first began this work, this was one of the things I was really like, I'm got a lot of acquaintances, but I don't feel often like people really know me. And I can sort of work a room, but I'm exhausted by it. And it's not that fun. And I can go to networking events and I'm fine, but I don't really know anyone and blah, 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 blah. And so the path out of that for me was one, my coach at the time supported me to get clear, like, what's the breakthrough you actually want? Rather than even worrying about this breakdown you've spent the last 15 years of your life managing, what do you want over here? What do you actually want? So that's the first place we got to shift our view to, is away from this breakdown that we're resisting and avoiding and scared of, to what do you actually want that would be worth doing any of this stuff for? And then practicing, going for it. Oh, hello, Mia. So lovely to see you. And then going for that breakthrough and letting go of our fears about the breakdown. So as an example, I'll share one in my life. This is an early one. You've probably heard me share this before. I couldn't think of a good other more recent example. I know there was plenty. When I wanted to create a new experience of how I connected with people and how I showed up in the world, I started chatting to randoms and talked to random people on the ferry, random people on the bus. And some of those people were really cold and didn't want anything to do with me because I was an imposition on their day, their time. That's understandable. If a stranger starts talking to you, sometimes you're going to be like, fuck off. And other times you're going to be like, oh, this is great. And so I was practicing this new way of showing up with people, a willingness to confront that breakdown in service of developing a new way of connecting with people. And on the heels of that, a couple things happened. One, I got a lot less afraid of that breakdown. The breakdown stopped being very important, stopped being something I really had to manage at all. Two, I found that sometimes people really enjoyed that. We'd get into interesting conversations on the plane, interesting conversations on the ferry ride would go better. Three, I realized there's a lot of situations where I actually don't want to engage with people. So while I learned and developed the ability to talk to people on an airplane, I also realized, okay, now that I can do that, I don't really want to. I kind of like to put my head in my book, not really engage too much. I don't like being stuck with for 8 hours, chat. Do we keep talking? I don't know. And so I reached the point where I developed the capacity to do so and to create an entirely different relationship to what was happening, and then decided maybe that's not what I'm going to do here, but maybe I'll do it over there. So that was kind of the breakthrough that got created, a new way of showing up, connecting with other human beings, stepping over the breakdown rather than putting attention on it. And the other thing I'll say we tend to do before I talk about a client story is if we've got a breakdown here that we're resisting and there's the breakthrough we really want, most of the time what we do is we sort of, rather than look at the breakthrough we're after, we get really further fixated on the breakdown. So initially it was all about how do I set up stuff to avoid the breakdown? The next iteration of this, the ego's game, is, oh, you created a bunch of strategies to avoid the breakdown. How can you force yourself to create the breakdown? Notice that puts zero attention on the breakthrough you actually want. The attention's still on this breakdown. So then it would be like, maybe what I'll do is I'll go and intentionally get rejected by people. So my attention gets put on this breakdown rather than the breakthrough. Now, if I've spent my whole life avoiding rejection, then just going and getting more rejection is not going to be very hard. It's actually going to be quite easy. And the trap there is, it's like I've got my finger on the scale. You know, I'm going and doing something, but the stakes are already removed. This is kind of why when Seth Godin calls it failure porn, where people are like, I'm afraid of failure, so I'm going to go and create a bunch of failure. Yeah, but going and intentionally creating failure is not the same thing as going and intentionally trying to create success and putting your all into it only to then fail and have to sit with the stinging taste of failure in your mouth. That's radically different. So if I go to Starbucks and I say, hey, could I be given $10,000 out of your till? That's going to be different energetically than if I go to Starbucks and ask out the girl that's beautiful, that I've been pining over, that I really want to date me, but I'm afraid she'll reject me. The flavor of rejection in both of those is drastically different. And it's this latter one that we're really aiming towards when we're trying to create a breakthrough. It's sort of like, one more metaphor for this is a team can play, a sports team can typically play, like broadly speaking, one of two ways. They can play the game to win, or they can play the game to not lose. So if you're putting your attention on playing to not lose, what you're doing is you build up your team. So is, how do we stop the other team from scoring goals? How do we make sure they don't do the things that we know they're good at doing and stop them from doing that? So you play not to lose. The alternative is, how do we play to win? How do we best implement our game plan so that we win this game? If you want to win, you got to play to win. The trouble with playing to win is it puts you at risk of losing, because your primary intention is on what do we need to do to win. And that means you're going to take some of your focus away from how do we stop them from winning. And so they're going to get to score more goals on you and do stuff like that. So you got to beat them at winning. The team that's playing not to lose, the analogy here that I would draw, where the failure porn version is sort of like, okay, we've been playing to avoid losing. So what we need to do now is just lose a whole bunch. And yeah, that'll sort of, it'll diminish a bit of your fear, your concern about what it's like to lose, but it's never going to be the same as if you put your all into something and then lose. It's never the same energy. Okay, so here's one last client story I'll share, and then we'll wind down here. Can't believe no one said hi to Mia except me. Hello, Mia. You are indeed lovely. So I had a client, excuse me, my throat's a little bit phlegmy. It's like I'm wanting to make points. I keep hemming. I had a client, and what they had created in their life, the breakdown they've resisted was they were really afraid. Oh, Mia's saying, this is so helpful, Adam. I want to create a breakthrough in a relationship in which I've been relating in order to not lose the friendship. Uh-huh. Yeah, totally, right? That's how most of our romantic relationships start to grow stale, is we show up with our partner so as not to rock the boat, so as not to create problems, so as not to lose the relationship, rather than so as to create the relationship we're committed to creating. And I'm guilty of this too. This happens to me not infrequently. I guess hair's driving me nuts. I cannot wait for it to get a little bit longer. And so I do that too. I don't want to share that thing I'm scared to share, because what'll it do to the relationship? So better not to share it. And then you end up in a relationship with someone where you're both holding stuff from each other. You're hiding things, and it doesn't work so well. It's part of what we do with our teachers. Share the stuff we're afraid to share with each other. And this is one of the things that counseling is really, really good for, is that whether or not you feel your relationship's having problems, it provides a facilitated conversation where someone can invite that stuff out of you and hold the container so that the impact of you sharing something that's scary to share doesn't blow your relationship wide open. What a lot of people try to do is, I'm just going to share the scary thing, and then they kind of blow their partner's like, what the hell? And then it becomes this huge issue and a big fight. So it can be really helpful to have this facilitated sometimes. Lydia saying, this sounds similar to creating from lack. Yeah, absolutely. And Mia is saying, I've been thinking about how can I say what I want to say in my friendship, and secretly, how can I do it in a way where I don't risk losing the friendship? Yeah, I really get it. So this client, this is another breakthrough kind of conversation. This one didn't end in a breakthrough. That happens sometimes. I think we'll come back to that, to Katie's initial question, because I think there'll be a place to relate to this. So this client was very successful. They were at the time, the highest, the most money I charged for a client, and it wasn't too big of a deal for them to pay the money. They could kind of handle it, ish. And They were very successful. They created a successful business as an entrepreneur with a number of different storefronts and stuff like that. But what they'd done was they'd kind of created all of it. Well, the breakdown that they were resistant to in their life was failing. They didn't want to make a choice and fail catastrophically. They were very worried about what if I take a direction. They were dissatisfied with the direction they were in life, but they were very afraid to take a new direction and risk failing. And so the strategies they adopted to deal with that problem were one, learn, like get other people to tell them what to do and then do what the other person tells them to do, because that way you're kind of offloading the risk onto someone else. It's not me taking this risk, I'm following their advice. And what that would do was they would often, that advice was pretty sound. So when it was sound, they would get some success, but then they would feel bad because they didn't feel like they had earned the success. And they would feel a debt, an energetic debt to that person, or they would resent that person because they'd done what that person told them to do. And yeah, they were being successful, they hadn't failed, but this wasn't the life they wanted. It was the life that person saw for them, which is never going to be perfectly aligned. The alternative is sometimes they'd follow that advice and it would fail, and then they'd resent that person for giving them bad advice. So that was one of the strategies to avoid this sort of like, what if I take the step and I fail? That really puts their ass out over the line, right? Better to have someone else do it. The other thing that they'd learn to do is just stay in the status quo. Don't do anything different. Wait for things to change. So this never really works because it's a little bit like sit, keep doing things you've always been doing, hope for a different result. Kind of lunacy, right? Not likely to make the difference you're hoping it will make, but there's a safety to it. It's like, I can handle the devil I know. Better to just sit here, be with that. Yay. So, so this client came to me and they wanted a different experience of life. And as time went on, we started to like distinguish this. They started to get clear, like, oh wow, that's what's going on, and I'm kind of waiting for people to tell me what to do. And what happens in a coaching relationship is your client is going to bring the exact same energy that they have out there in their life to the relationship with their coach. So this client really didn't want to take action themselves, really to stay safe, to avoid the breakdown they were afraid of, looked to other people to try to give them stuff and stayed still until they were given something or something magically changed. And they did the exact same thing in the coaching. Their energy kept, like they'd show up and be like, here's the thing. And then I'd start to ask them questions to draw out their wisdom. And they would answer from a place of like, they wouldn't really try very hard in their answer, because what they were really looking for was me to tell them what to do. And I got answers. I got stuff I can say. I'm a smart guy, just like you're probably a smart person. But even if I gave them the best answer in the world, it's just going to feed back into that same avoidance mechanism we talked about. And eventually I'm going to become the new person they resent, or for whatever reason, either because they owe me a debt, because I helped them do their thing, and then they felt like they weren't good enough to do it on themselves, or because I gave them the wrong answer and I screwed everything up for them, blah, blah, blah. So they brought that exact same energy into the coaching. And what our coaching ultimately became was me standing back, reflecting this to them, like, hey, I notice it really seems like you want me to give you an answer. And being like, yeah, I really want you to give me an answer. Why aren't you giving an answer? Well, is that really what you want? Blah, blah, blah. And then when that sort of became dissatisfying for them just sort of sitting and not doing anything and hoping that my hair is very bouncy today, Mia. Very. It needs some product in it. And so that the coaching became very dissatisfying for them, which was beautiful because that's exactly the experience they're creating in their own life. Life was very dissatisfying for this person. They had everything they wanted and they were dissatisfied. And so, of course, that same thing's going to happen in the coaching. Coaching is not some magical thing that has your life go differently inside the container of the coaching. Coaching is a magical thing that has your life go exactly the same way. It goes everywhere outside of coaching. It goes the exact same way in the coaching, but the difference is we get you some distance so you can point to it and notice, oh, wow, this is how my life goes. And then we can talk about it. My client couldn't see this. It was too obscure for him. It was too hard for them to get the distance. And so what ultimately happened is they quit. They were like, I'm not taking action. I notice I'm not doing the stuff, and so I'm going to take a break so I can come back even more committed. So it's not that I'm quitting, I'm actually getting even more committed. And and that was 5 years ago. I've never heard from them since. And there's nothing wrong with someone wanting to move on, someone wanting to quit. It's simply that the real work for this person, I would assert, would have been to stay and continue to get the reflection, to continue to look in the mirror as this got more and more and more frustrating until eventually they got to the point of, fuck this. I'm showing up to these conversations. Adam's asking me these questions. It's annoying. I'm not doing anything. I'm tired of that. I don't know the right answer. No one seems to have it. I'm just going to fucking try something. That would have been the breakthrough moment. That would have been the moment where they let go of trying to resist that breakdown they were afraid of and finally took an action of their own volition, of their own choice, and got to discover and experience how it went and either succeed from their own decision or fail from their own decision. But whether they succeeded or failed wasn't the point. The point would have been that they would have taken action that they chose, and they would have gotten to be with all of that. And if they failed, they would have gotten to take on the work to complete on that, to forgive themselves, and then do what's next. They never managed to get there. So this is an example of one of those, you've all probably seen those, that image where there's like three men mining, and there's like the diamonds, and the one guy has gotten right up to the wall, and then he's walking the other way. He's given up. The diamonds are right there. And that's where people quit. They quit right there. He was right on the precipice and couldn't see it. So that's a story where like the person was right up against the breakdown and they just couldn't get themselves over it. They couldn't create a breakthrough worth going towards, and they just quit. This is not a blame thing, right? They couldn't see. I could see it. That's what my job is, right? And I did my best to reflect it, but I still couldn't seem to do so in a way that worked. Now, having said all this, I want to come back to Katie's question, which was originally, how do you define success and integrity in what I offer, even though I can't be responsible for my results? So where does my responsibility for what happened in that coaching relationship show up? This client of mine, it's not my job to go and like make them do stuff. And if I did, that's not very good coaching, because now I'm taking away from their sovereignty. That's not my work. And that's going to be exhausting if you're trying to do that for all your clients. Exhausting. Many, many, many people who are not very well trained as coaches, just because there's not a lot of great training out there available, experience burnout in this profession and then leave it because they have not learned and created the breakthroughs required to be able to stand back and not do their clients' work for them. So they burn out because they're putting so much energy into their client. And then they're like, fuck, coaching's crazy. I'm burning out. It's no good. You're not coaching right now. You're trying to be an advisor, a friend, a helping parent. That's not what coaching is. So that being said, it's not my job to get him to do that stuff, this client. But what is my job? Is this the point where I just dust my hands and say it was all on him? So I could do that. The game here is to come back to that conversation we said, which is how can I be 100% responsible for how this went down without stepping over there into my client's sovereignty? So the places I brought this to my coach, and I looked on my own as well, and the places I could start to see were like, oh, well, I didn't see this happening very early on. So I could start in the future, I could notice this sooner. And there was probably a point where I started to realize this was happening, but there was a satisfaction of this person holding me like an expert, holding me up on a pedestal. Oh, Adam's got the answers. Something that happens sometimes is, by the way, my hair looks a lot like the guy from Boy Meets World, for anyone that remembers that show. His best friend, Corey, this is how his hair looked. Stupid, Adam, I lost your point. Oh, that's right. Being responsible. How do I be 100% responsible for this? And I could see I would ask a question like, so what do you make it mean that this is happening? And then my client's response would be something like, oh, it's a really good point. And as I looked back at that, I could start to see like, oh, that's a place my client is not hearing me as someone inviting them to get curious about their own inquiry. My client's hearing me as offering them, like as making a point, My client's listening for me is like, oh, Adam is telling me stuff. He's giving me advice. He's making points at me. That's not what I'm trying to do as a coach. I am not making points. At no point in our conversation am I making points with my client. I'm inviting them to draw conclusions and make points through their own process of inquiry. So looking back, I could start to see, oh, there was something about this dynamic that felt juicy to my ego. It felt kind of nice. It felt like, I got some expertise here. I'm onto something. I could start to see I was scared to confront this because this client had paid me the biggest sum of money I'd ever earned at that point. So I was kind of frightened. I could see like, oh, next time I get a new client that pays me the biggest sum of money, part of what there is for me to be responsible for is that's going to have an impact, and I might need to get supported by my coach, or I might need to just be clear that that's there and step past it. Okay, got it. So I could start to see all of these places without making them wrong for it, without making myself wrong for it, just, oh, there's new levels of responsibility I could take on here. There's new places I could take a look. And hopefully you can see from this lens I'm looking through that there's always more responsibility we can take. You don't have to take it. It's not required, but that's always available. I'll share one last place. John Travolta in Greece. Cool. Danny Zuko, was that his name? Mia's saying, I just described her coaching journey at the moment. She's hoping the coaching will magically change her life while still doing exactly what she's done. Yeah, this is what most of us do, is we desire a different experience or result in life while continuing to do the exact same things and hoping that'll magically work, but it doesn't. It never does. Never seems to. Um, the last place I'll speak to, well, again, responsibility is always a choice. And so there's times when perhaps it would better serve us not to make that choice. I had a client who really broke my heart ultimately, which is not uncommon. You know, it's a heartbreaking profession to be in. We fall in love with people, we fall in love with their possibility, we see what they're capable of, and then they choose their fear. Not because they're dumb or stupid or broken, but because fear's scary and fear works. And so they choose from their fear rather than from their possibility, and then they do things like quit or leave or choose something different or whatever, and that's heartbreaking. Like, but I'm holding your dream is so beautiful and it's there for you. So it's a heartbreaking profession, and that's okay. This client did a lot of work in the realm of helping people not be victimized by their experience around them. And the thing that was hard to reflect to this client was their total victimhood. So they were operating under the guise, like their belief was, I've overcome my victimhood. In fact, their entire business model was basically like, you're being victimized by people. Here's how to not let them hold you down. But the energy of that was still, these people are victimizing you. So they're the problem. Now here's how to not let them being the problem overcome you. So you see this a lot in sort of empowerment work, where it ultimately it ironically perpetuates someone's victimhood under the auspice of empowerment. Don't let those fuckers hold you down. They're gaslighting you. Yeah, maybe there's something to be responsible for in how you're receiving them that has you constantly feel gaslit. How are you receiving, relating, all that sort of stuff. So this person had a high degree, they really created an experience of victimhood for themselves. And then layered this, I'm a leader, I no longer am held by victim on top of that. And so as we did more and more work, that ultimately that became the thing in their way. And the breakdown they were unwilling to be with is like coming to ownership of that. And so I was doing my best to try to, how do I reflect this to them in a way they can hear, because they were really against it, really resistant to this idea that they would ever be a victim because they've killed that part of their life. It's no longer a function. So I brought this to my coach a lot. This client I got a lot of support with because I really felt challenged in it. And eventually what happened was they started to work with a counselor for something else, which was a beautiful thing. And the counselor helped them kind of come to an awareness of a part of their life that really had left them quite victimized. And it was almost like, the floodgates had opened for them. And finally, they could they could actually own that they felt as though a victim. And what they did with that was they turned and they made me the perpetrator of their victimization. Not entirely for their whole life, but like a significant amount of it. And I was like devastated by it because I worked so hard, I brought so much of this conversation to my coach and worked so hard. And I really, I got this email from them basically like ending the relationship and sort of kind of saying like the email had a fair bit of like, fuck you, and don't write back to me because I need you to keep your distance. And I was just like, shit, okay, I'm not going to create any more mess. And so my commitment at this point was like, okay, I don't want to create any further mess for this person. I'm going to refund all the money that is outstanding, and I'm just going to not respond to them. I'm going to honor what they've asked for. And I sent this email to my coach, and I was like, this just happened. I'm kind of fucked up about it. And she called me straight away, and she was like, okay, this might be really hard for you to hear right now, Adam. I want you to understand this has nothing to do with you. Which was not when she said this might be hard for you to hear. I was like expecting her to be like, you fucked this person's life up. This is all your fault. She gave me the opposite. This has nothing to do with you. And I was like, but I want to take a look and see how can I be responsible and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, this has nothing to do with you. This is not something that you need to take responsibility for. It doesn't mean that there was an opportunity to look back and still be like, what can I notice? What was going on? Who can I be responsible for? But what my coach was offering me was that in that moment when my client had kind of shattered my heart, really, right? Not from malice, just from her being in her own process. And really, to her credit, walking towards a breakthrough. Like for the first time in many, many, many years, she'd created the breakdown. She'd stepped into that breakdown. Breakdowns are messy. Things happen. So it's not that she did something wrong. I was kind of collateral damage. And my work, your work, our work as coaches is to be willing to be the person that receives this and keeps our heart open and lets someone devastate us with love, our love for them, and then works ourselves back out. And so I've gone back and looked like, what can I see? How do I honor that? What is there for me to own and to acknowledge and be responsible for and do differently in the future? And in that moment, me looking down that path was not the thing to do. It was not the point to do that. So I guess I'm discovering as I answer Katie's brilliant question that I don't have a simple answer to how do we define success and integrity and what we offer, even though we can't be responsible for our results. What I will say is I think this sort of question is why it's so powerful when coaches work with their own teachers, coaches, et cetera, because this stuff, like I said, and modeled with my liquid it's fluid. And when something's fluid, it means that there's not a one right answer. And as soon as we're in the space where there's not a one right answer, we can be fluid to some extent, but over time, we're going to crystallize. We're going to harden into the right answers of the past, because in the past, this is what was going on and this is what worked. So, oh, got it. Here's how I define success and integrity and what I offer, even though I can't be responsible for the results. And then here's a nice, clean answer. I don't have to worry about that anymore. But my experience is deepening in this work, there isn't ever a point you reach like that. There's never a point I reach where I'm like, great, now I have the answer. I know how to answer this. It's just what's happening in this moment. I'm thrown off. I don't really know how to be with this. I'm going to bring this to my coach so she can support me to come back to my own truth and to discover whatever my next truth is, and then bring that. So the way I define success and integrity, the way I practice responsibility, and the way I practice sovereignty, honoring my sovereignty and my clients, is a moving target. That's a organic, growing, living practice. And my coach supports me to continue to live into that practice. That's a pretty good answer. I like the way that came out. Okay, well, we did pretty good there. Big thanks to Monica and Katie for your questions. Jess, thanks for dropping in and asking another question. Lydia, Cami, Dave, Mia, anyone else I want to give a shout out to that I can see in there in the comments here? Sherry, hello everyone. Thanks for being here. Thanks for hanging out. Happy Canada Day. I hope you guys have an amazing weekend. Enjoy the long weekend, the Canadian long weekend. And remember to relax your asshole. Relax your sphincter. Bye, guys.